Have you ever noticed this? While religious leaders throughout history wear different kinds of clothing, the Pope always appears in white. But here comes the curious part. It wasn't always like that. And for centuries, the Pope's color was something else, far more striking. Now imagine this. A man dressed in deep red, surrounded by gold, seated at the center of the most influential power in Europe. And suddenly, everything changes. But why? Stay with me until the end, because the explanation is deeper than it seems. And it involves power, tradition, and a decision that changed the image of the Church forever. To understand this, we need to go back in time. During the Middle Ages and the early modern period, the Pope was not only a religious figure, he was also one of the most powerful men in the world. He influenced kings, political decisions, and even wars. And like every authority of that time, clothing carried a powerful meaning. Red was the main color associated with the Pope and the Church in general. But it wasn't just any red. It was a deep, bold red associated with three main things: power, authority, and the blood of Christian martyrs. That blood symbolized the first Christians who died for their faith in the Roman Empire. So red was not only luxury, it was also a very strong spiritual and political message. At that time, the Pope wore many types of garments. Some ceremonies were extremely lavish. Long red capes, heavy fabrics, golden details, crowns, and symbols of authority. The idea was clear, to show that the Church was not only spiritual, but also an institution of global power. But over the centuries, this began to generate criticism. Many people started to see that excess luxury as something far removed from the simplicity of Jesus. And this is where the change begins, even if no one realized it yet. Now, the most important part of the video: the Pope was not always white. The white clothing we know today did not appear by chance. It began to take shape in the 16th century with one specific Pope, Pius V. He was a member of the Dominican order, which already wore simple white habits. When he became Pope, he made an unusual decision, and he kept the simple habit of his religious order. Instead of adopting the traditional luxury of the papal court, this created something new, a simpler, more sober, and more spiritual image of the Pope. But pay attention. He did not eliminate red all at once. Red continued to appear in parts of the clothing and in important ceremonies, but white gradually began to gain more space and influence. Over time, white took on a deep meaning within the Church. It came to represent a purity, a peace, the spiritual simplicity, while red reminded people of power and sacrifice. White began to represent a leadership that was more spiritual and less political. The image of the Pope began to change along with the world. Over the centuries, white became the Pope's most recognized everyday clothing. Today we almost always see the Pope like this: the white cassock, this white sash. A simple appearance. But red never disappeared. It still appears in ceremonies, liturgical details, and historic symbols of the Church. In other words, white became the modern image of the Pope. But red remains in tradition. So in practice, what changed was not only the clothing, it was the way the world began to see the Pope. From a symbol of political power to a more spiritual and universal figure. And perhaps the real question is not only, why does the Pope wear white? But rather, it's what does that change say about the history of the Church itself? If you enjoy content like this, hidden stories, church curiosities, and facts that almost no one talks about, follow the channel now, because here there are always more stories you've never heard anywhere else.